When powerful CEO Nicholas Hartman hires struggling artist Amelia Carter to pose as his fiancée, neither expects the lie to ignite a love that feels all too real. Amid the glitter of high society and the sharp claws of an ambitious ex, their carefully crafted story crumbles, forcing them to choose between fear and the messy, breathtaking truth. Will love survive once the masks fall away? Dive into this unforgettable journey of unexpected passion, raw vulnerability, and true courage. Where are you listening from? Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to hear more stories that touch your soul. Nicholas Hartman hated losing control. As CEO of Hartman Technologies, he was used to orchestrating multi-million-dollar deals with clinical precision. Yet here he was, standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, overlooking the glittering veins of downtown Chicago, feeling utterly cornered. His Patek Philippe glinted under the city lights as he checked the time for the third time in 10 minutes. He hadn't wanted it to come to this, but desperation made even the most calculating men do reckless things. His younger brother Daniel was getting married this weekend at a sprawling lakeside resort, and their mother, Veronica Hartman, was determined to use the celebration as her latest matchmaking campaign. Worse, Sabrina Cross, the beautiful, vindictive ex he had spent nearly a year disentangling himself from, would be there too, parading around with her perfect smile and sharp claws. Nick couldn't stomach the idea of enduring 3 days of scrutiny, manipulation, and old wounds reopening. He needed a shield. Not a real relationship. God no, but the illusion of one. Something believable enough to fend off Veronica's endless schemes and keep Sabrina at arm's length. Monica Lane, his razor-sharp executive assistant, had hesitated when he first floated the idea, but by the next morning she had delivered a solution with her usual efficiency. Amelia Carter. A freelance illustrator, 34 years old, based in Wicker Park. No flashy past, no messy complications. Monica had assured him Amelia was intelligent, discreet, and in need of cash, desperately enough to agree to a strange weekend arrangement. She checked every box Nick had laid out, poised, trouble-free, able to smile on command. It should have been simple, so why did he feel like he was waiting for a bomb to explode? The soft chime of the private elevator snapped him out of his spiraling thoughts. He straightened his navy blue suit, loosening his tie just slightly, rehearsing the curt, professional greeting he had prepared. Then Monica stepped out, her sleek blonde hair twisted into a no-nonsense bun, her ever-present tablet in hand. "Mr. Hartman," she said crisply, "Miss Carter is here." Nick braced himself, and then he saw her. Amelia Carter was not what he expected, not even close, no rigid posture or calculated elegance. Instead, she stood casually, dressed in a simple, dark sapphire dress that hugged her slender figure without screaming for attention. Her chestnut brown hair fell in soft waves around her face, and her only adornment seemed to be a quiet confidence that radiated from her large, forest green eyes. Those eyes met his without hesitation, sharp, curious, unafraid. The polished words Nick had prepared evaporated into thin air. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Hartman. Or should I call you Nick?" she said, her voice clear and warm. "Nick," he croaked out, recovering quickly as he shook her hand. Her grip was firm, but her fingers were delicate, as if made for weaving magic onto paper. The rational part of Nick's brain immediately began recalculating. Was her natural beauty an advantage or a liability? Would she attract too much attention? Would Veronica sniff out the lie within 5 minutes? As they sat in the sleek, minimalist living room to go over final details, Nick handed her a thick file. Hartman family history, guest lists, a script outlining their whirlwind romance at an art gala. Amelia flipped through the papers with an arched brow, clearly unimpressed. "This story is cute," she said, choosing her words carefully. "But don't you think it's a little too perfect? No couple really remembers every detail like a script." Nick frowned. "It's better to be precise. Control the narrative." She tilted her head, considering. "Maybe, but real love is messy, unpredictable. If anyone digs too deep, we'll get caught because no real couple acts like that." Against his better judgment, Nick found himself intrigued by her boldness. Together, they spent the next hour revising their story, weaving in imperfections, an accidental coffee spill, a clumsy first dance, until it felt almost believable, almost real. As the evening wore on and the lights of Chicago blurred into golden rivers behind the glass, Nick realized something unsettling. For the first time in years, he wasn't the one in total control. And strangely, he didn't hate it. Tomorrow, they would leave for Lake Geneva and face the real challenge, fooling everyone. But tonight, as he watched Amelia laugh softly at one of her own clever revisions, Nick Hartman had the sinking feeling that the biggest danger wasn't his mother or Sabrina Cross. It was the woman sitting across from him. The black sedan glided through winding country roads, carrying them farther from the buzz of Chicago and deeper into the quiet elegance of Lake Geneva. Amelia sat by the window, her sketchbook balanced on her knees, though her pencil had long since stilled. She tried not to think about how insane this all was, pretending to be the fiancée of a billionaire stranger for 3 days, surrounded by his family, surrounded by people who would dissect her every move. Next to her, Nick stared at his tablet, swiping through documents with mechanical efficiency. He barely glanced her way, maintaining the cool distance of a man used to being in charge. Amelia tried to convince herself that was a good thing. The more detached he stayed, the easier it would be to keep the lines between pretend and real from blurring. The car pulled into the Grand Resort, an estate straight out of a fairy tale, perched along the lake's shimmering edge. Towering oaks framed the long driveway, and white flowers spilled from manicured gardens in artful abundance. Amelia swallowed hard as the valet opened her door. Nick offered his hand, professional and steady. She accepted it with a smile she prayed looked natural. Inside, the main lobby buzzed with guests arriving for the weekend's festivities. Polished floors gleamed under ornate chandeliers, and staff bustled about with quiet precision. Amelia barely had time to soak it all in before a voice sliced through the air. "There you are." Daniel Hartman, younger and broader-shouldered than Nick, bounded toward them. His grin was wide and disarming, his energy a sharp contrast to his brother's calculated coolness. "Everyone's waiting to meet your mystery girl," Daniel said, clapping Nick on the back with brotherly affection before turning to Amelia. "You must be Amelia. Welcome to the madness." Amelia laughed, the sound light even as nerves twisted her stomach. Daniel's fiancée, Lily Summers, soon joined them, greeting Amelia with a warm hug and sparkling eyes that spoke of genuine kindness. For a moment, Amelia allowed herself to breathe. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad. Maybe she could survive 3 days of pretending. That hope evaporated when Veronica Hartman appeared. She was everything Amelia had expected and more. Tall, perfectly coiffed, and dressed in a sleek designer suit that likely cost more than Amelia's entire wardrobe. Veronica's eyes, sharp and calculating, skimmed over Amelia in a single sweep, cataloging every flaw. "So this is Amelia," Veronica said, her voice pleasant but cold enough to frost glass. "Yes, mother," Nick said, his tone clipped. Veronica extended a hand and Amelia shook it, matching her grip with careful firmness. "And what do you do, dear?" "I'm an illustrator," Amelia replied, keeping her voice steady. "Freelance. I also manage a bookstore my grandmother started." Veronica's smile tightened. "Ah, freelance. So, no stable income then?" Before Amelia could answer, Nick stepped in smoothly. "Amelia's passion and creativity are exactly what drew me to her mother. She's not just brilliant at what she does, she's fearless." The warmth in his voice startled Amelia. She glanced at him, but his face gave away nothing, cool as ever. Still, something flickered in Veronica's eyes, a glimmer of doubt or perhaps grudging respect, before she retreated with a murmured excuse about checking on the caterers. Amelia exhaled slowly. First hurdle cleared, barely. Later that evening, at the welcome dinner on the terrace, the pressure mounted. Twinkling lights wrapped around ancient trees, and a string quartet played soft music over the low hum of conversation. Guests mingled with champagne glasses in hand, and Amelia clung to her carefully memorized script. Nick's hand found the small of her back, guiding her through the crowd. It was a light touch, almost mechanical, but the contact sent a confusing ripple of awareness through her. They played their parts well. She laughed when she was supposed to, smiled when he brushed an imaginary speck off her shoulder, nodded at the fabricated tales of how they met. Yet every time she glanced up and caught Nick watching her, not the practiced businessman, but the man underneath, the air between them tightened almost unbearably. And then Sabrina Cross arrived. She swept onto the terrace like a storm cloud, every inch of her designed to demand attention. Blood-red dress, golden hair cascading in perfect waves, and a smile sharp enough to cut glass. When Sabrina's eyes landed on Amelia, a small, venomous smile curved her lips. "Well, well," she purred as she slinked up to them. "Nicholas? And? Whoever this is." Nick's hand pressed more firmly against Amelia's back, anchoring her. "This is Amelia," he said, his voice icy. "My fiancée." The lie tasted almost sweet on his tongue, but as Sabrina's calculating gaze slid from him to Amelia and back again, a chill wrapped itself around Amelia's heart. This was only the beginning, and somehow she knew it was going to get much, much worse. The second day of the wedding festivities unfolded like a carefully choreographed play, but beneath the polished veneer, cracks began to appear. Amelia was painfully aware of every scrutinizing glance, every whispered conversation that stopped the moment she passed by. Nick kept close to her side, his arm occasionally brushing against hers in a way that was supposed to look casual but felt increasingly real. It was during the afternoon lake barbecue that the first real fracture showed. Amelia had excused herself to grab lemonade from the bar when a tall, charming stranger cornered her, one of Daniel's college friends, judging by the easy swagger and polo shirt. "You must be the famous fiancé," he said, flashing a smile that probably worked on half the resort staff. "Nicholas Hartman, huh? Must be one hell of a guy to land someone like you." Amelia laughed awkwardly, stepping back a fraction, but the man didn't catch the hint. He moved closer, too familiar, too curious. Nick appeared out of nowhere. His hand landed firmly around Amelia's waist, pulling her just enough against him to make the message clear. "Sorry, man," Nick said, his voice smooth but laced with steel. "We're having a private conversation." The college friend raised his hands in mock surrender and backed away, but the heat lingering where Nick's hand touched her side didn't dissipate. They walked in silence for a few minutes, the cool lake breeze doing little to calm the sudden, confusing rush of emotions. Amelia glanced up at Nick. His jaw was tight, his eyes narrowed slightly as if waging a battle he didn't even want to admit to himself. "Overprotective much?" she teased lightly, trying to break the tension. Nick's lips quirked at the corner, but he didn't answer. Instead, his hand remained on her lower back a moment longer than necessary before he finally let go. Later that evening, Amelia wandered through one of the side hallways of the estate, needing a few minutes away from the crowd. As she rounded a corner near the break room, voices froze her in place. "You relax," she heard Sabrina's low, confident drawl. "I've got everything I need. A fake engagement, a broke bookstore artist. Pathetic. Once I show Veronica, it'll all be over. Trust me, I know how to ruin a fraud." Amelia pressed herself against the wall, her heart hammering painfully against her ribs. The blood drained from her face. She clutched her small clutch bag to her chest, willing herself to disappear. Sabrina had proof. She knew everything. For a terrible moment, Amelia considered bursting into the ballroom, dragging Nick aside, confessing everything. But the humiliation rooted her to the spot. Wouldn't it confirm everyone's worst assumptions? That she was a gold digger, a liar, an imposter who had no business standing next to a man like Nicholas Hartman? No. She had to survive just one more day. She could keep up the act until after the wedding. Then she would disappear from his world, like she was never there. Gathering herself, Amelia returned to the terrace, pasting on the practiced smile she had perfected over the last 24 hours. Nick was talking to Daniel and Lily by the fire pit, laughing easily, his expression lighter than she had seen before. When he spotted her, his eyes softened in a way that nearly unraveled her resolve. He excused himself and crossed the terrace to her, slipping his hand into hers without hesitation. The warmth of his fingers steadied her trembling nerves. "You okay?" he murmured. "Of course," she lied smoothly. He squeezed her hand, holding her gaze a heartbeat longer than necessary, as if searching for something deeper. Amelia smiled, but inside, panic coiled tighter. That night, during the formal dinner, they were swept onto the dance floor. The string quartet played a slow, romantic waltz, and for once, neither had to fake their ease. Nick's hand rested gently at her waist, guiding her with surprising grace. "You dance better than I expected," he said, sounding almost surprised himself. "My grandmother taught me," Amelia whispered back. "She said dancing is just another form of storytelling. You have to feel it, not think it." Nick chuckled under his breath, a low, genuine sound that made her chest ache. For the first time, Amelia allowed herself to relax against him. She let herself believe, even if only for a few fleeting minutes, that what they were pretending could somehow be real. The night glittered around them like a snow globe, and as they moved in slow circles under the twinkling fairy lights, neither noticed Sabrina lurking at the edge of the crowd, a predatory smile playing on her lips, her phone clutched tightly in hand, ready to strike. The wedding day dawned under a crisp blue sky, sunlight bouncing off the gentle ripples of Lake Geneva. Everything about Daniel and Lily's ceremony looked plucked from the pages of a fairy tale. White roses lining the aisle, soft classical music floating in the air, and guests dabbing at their eyes as the couple exchanged heartfelt vows. Amelia stood at Nick's side, her hand lightly resting on his arm, the smile on her face warm enough to fool anyone. But inside her stomach was a tangle of dread. Sabrina's threats from the night before haunted her like a shadow, coiling tighter with every passing hour. The ceremony passed in a beautiful blur. Applause, cheers, the clinking of glasses, the toss of Lily's bouquet, and then the wedding reception began under the grand white canopy by the lakeside, with champagne flowing and laughter echoing into the evening air. Nick was pulled into conversations with business associates and family friends, leaving Amelia to fend for herself near the bar. She was just reaching for a glass of lemonade when a familiar, grating voice slid into her ear. "We need to talk, darling actress," Sabrina hissed, her red lips curved in a predator's smile. Amelia turned slowly, masking her racing heart with polite confusion. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said evenly. "Oh, don't pretend," Sabrina purred, holding up her phone. The screen showed a damning email thread, Monica arranging the contract, discussing Amelia's payment. "One little tap," Sabrina whispered, her finger hovering dramatically over the screen, "and this gets forwarded to your charming future mother-in-law. Or maybe I just stand up and announce it to the room. Wouldn't that be fun?" Amelia's throat closed up. She barely managed a reply. "You don't have to do this." "Oh, but I want to," Sabrina said sweetly. "You see, sweetheart, some of us don't like losing. And you're just a pawn. One I'm about to knock right off the board." Before Amelia could react, a shadow fell over them. Nick, his eyes locked onto Sabrina's phone first, then onto Amelia's pale face. A deadly, cold calm settled over him. "What's going on here, Sabrina?" Nick's voice sliced through the chatter around them, sharp and commanding. Sabrina didn't flinch. She turned the phone outward for him, and everyone nearby to see. "Look, everyone," she cried out, loud enough for the nearest tables to hush. "Meet Nicholas Hartman's perfect fiancée. Paid. Scripted. A complete fraud." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Glasses paused midair. Veronica, drawn by the commotion, was already striding toward them, her expression thunderous. This was it. The end of the charade. Amelia felt the ground tilt beneath her feet, heat rushing to her cheeks. Part of her wished Nick would hate her, dismiss her, walk away. It would hurt less than being exposed under the glare of 100 judging eyes. Nick looked at her. Not at Sabrina, not at the phone, not even at his horrified mother. Just at her. And what he saw wasn't a liar or a mistake. He saw the woman who had stood by him, who had smiled and laughed and made him feel like something more than a machine built for success. Nick stepped forward, took Amelia's trembling hand in his, and raised his voice for all to hear. "Sabrina's right about one thing," he said clearly. "Amelia and I didn't meet the traditional way. We started with a lie, a messy, desperate arrangement, but somewhere along the way it stopped being pretend." Murmurs rose from the crowd. Veronica's mouth opened in shock. Amelia couldn't breathe. "I fell in love with her," Nick continued, squeezing Amelia's hand, grounding her. "Not because of a contract, not because of appearances, because of who she is, brilliant, kind, stubborn as hell, and because when she looks at me, I feel like I'm finally enough." He turned to the stunned crowd, then back to her, eyes burning with sincerity. "I love you, Amelia Carter," he said, every word a promise, "and nothing is going to change that." The world seemed to blur at the edges. Amelia stared up at him, her heart pounding wildly, not with fear anymore, but with something terrifyingly beautiful. Around them, the crowd erupted into scattered applause, confused but compelled by the rawness of the moment. Sabrina, furious and humiliated, snapped her phone shut and stormed off without another word. Veronica stared for a long, breathless moment before turning on her heel and disappearing into the crowd, leaving only silence in her wake. Nick leaned closer, his forehead brushing hers gently. "I meant every word," he whispered. "If you'll let me, this doesn't have to end here." For the first time since she'd stepped into this wild charade, Amelia allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, a lie could have written them the beginning of a real love story. The party roared back to life around them, but Amelia felt like she was moving through a dream. Nick didn't let go of her hand as they mingled, accepting polite congratulations from guests who were either genuinely touched or simply intrigued by the scandal-turned-love story. But later, once the music had faded and most of the guests had retired to their rooms, they found themselves walking along the quiet lake shore under a blanket of stars. The moonlight painted Nick's face in soft silver, and when he turned to her, the sharp CEO edges she had first met seemed to have melted away. "Everything's different now," Amelia said, her voice barely more than a whisper. Nick smiled gently. "Maybe, or maybe it was always there. We just didn't see it." He pulled a small envelope from his jacket pocket and handed it to her. Amelia unfolded it with trembling fingers to find a check. $15,000, the exact amount she had agreed to. "This is yours," he said, his voice steady. "No matter what happens between us, you earned it." Her throat tightened. She clutched the check, feeling the weight of it, of everything they had been through. Nick wasn't forcing her to stay. He wasn't bargaining or begging. He was giving her a choice. "I don't want this to be the end," he said softly. "Not because of a contract, not because of a mistake. I want to get to know you for real, Emmy. No scripts, no lies, just us." Amelia blinked back tears she hadn't realized were coming. She nodded, too choked up to answer properly, and Nick exhaled a breath he hadn't known he was holding before pulling her into a warm, grounding hug. The next day they returned to Chicago, but life didn't magically smooth itself out. Reality came crashing back, fast and relentless. Nick returned to his glass tower office in the heart of the city, juggling shareholders, board meetings, and million-dollar decisions. Amelia returned to Wicker Park, to her dusty little bookstore and its shelves sagging with memories. The differences between their worlds never felt starker. Amelia buried herself in work, using the check Nick had given her to cover the bookstore's overdue rent and kickstart minor renovations. She stayed busy repainting walls, cataloging ancient books, rebuilding the website. It was her way of staying sane, of protecting her heart from hopes she wasn't sure she dared nurture. Nick, meanwhile, tried calling a few times. Short, polite conversations that said everything and nothing all at once. He missed her more than he wanted to admit. His penthouse, once a symbol of success, now felt hollow. The city lights below his window sparkled without meaning. For the first time in his life, the future he had built so carefully felt empty without someone to share it with. One Saturday afternoon, instead of heading to the office or slipping into another mind-numbing networking event, Nick drove to Wicker Park. He found her at the Story Nook, a smear of blue paint on her cheek, her hair bundled into a messy knot, struggling to hammer a crooked bookshelf into place. She looked up, startled, when the little brass bell above the door jingled. Nick stood there, not in his sharp suits, but in worn jeans and a navy sweater, sleeves rolled up, a sheepish smile on his face. "Need a hand?" he asked, voice casual but eyes burning with something far deeper. Amelia's heart slammed against her ribs. She wanted to stay guarded, wanted to scold him for invading her safe space, but all she could do was laugh, a breathless, disbelieving sound. "Sure," she said, stepping aside. "If you think you can handle it, Mr. CEO." Together, they wrestled the bookshelf into place, laughing and grumbling like old friends. Dusty sunlight streamed through the front windows, casting a warm glow over them. When they finally collapsed onto the scuffed wooden floor, surrounded by old books and the scent of lemon cleaner, Nick turned to her. "I meant it, Emmy," he said quietly. "I'm not here to save you. I'm here because I'm stupid in love with you." Amelia stared at him, her heart breaking wide open. She reached out, tangling her fingers with his. "I'm glad you're stupid," she whispered, "because so am I." In that tiny, imperfect bookstore, Among battered paperbacks and cracked floorboards, they sealed their real beginning. Not born from lies or desperation, but from the simple, terrifying truth of two broken people choosing to love each other anyway. Sometimes the best things in life come from the moments we never planned. The messy, complicated choices that push us out of our comfort zones and into something real. Nick and Amelia's story reminds us that love isn't about perfection, scripted moments, or carefully calculated plans. It's about two people seeing each other for who they truly are, flaws and all, and choosing to stay. We often think we have to control everything to protect ourselves from failure or heartache. But real happiness usually begins when we dare to be vulnerable, to let go of expectations, and to trust in the unknown. Amelia had every reason to run away from a world she didn't belong to, and Nick had every excuse to hide behind his power and fear of loss. Yet both chose courage. Both chose each other. Their journey shows that love isn't about fitting into someone else's world. It's about building a new one together, from scratch, full of imperfections, but bursting with genuine feeling. No matter how different two people seem, shared kindness, respect, and sincerity can bridge even the widest gaps. So if you ever find yourself scared to take a leap, remember, the most beautiful stories often begin when you stop playing it safe and start listening to your heart. Thank you so much for spending your time with this story. We'd love to know, where are you listening from? Drop your country or city in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss more meaningful and heartfelt stories. See you in the next one.